two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Kayla Matos. Kayla is Deputy Director of Southside Community Center, also one of the two First Ward Alderpersons. But the really interesting thing is that she very recently attended a conference, this time in California, called Local Progress. And I don't really know much about it, except that I've occasionally heard that so-and-so went to Local Progress. So Kayla Matos, tell us about it.
So Local Progress is actually an organization which I love dearly, that works with elected officials on the local level to provide resources to us. Because a lot of the times on the local level, due to budgetary constraints, us elected officials don't have the staff resources. So the organization provides it to us. They also like to do these convenings like the one I just went to in California, just so that we can all come together. This past convening had 450 elected officials in between government and school board, which was really neat and amazing to just hear what so many folks are doing within other states, within our own states, but a different city, a different county. And it's really refreshing. And it's just, once again, just a reminder or a resource for us that one, we can rely heavily on, whether that just be supportive conversations or figuring out what's that next step for a piece of legislation.
Interesting that you mentioned school boards.
Mhm.
I wonder if I wonder if anyone from the Ithaca City School Board has ever attended.
So to my knowledge, not that I'm aware of. However, I am joining the New York organizing committee for our New York local progress chapter. And one of the things that I spoke about with the staffer that oversees New York was how can we do some recruitment within this area, and some of the folks that I would like to tap into is within our school board. So I'm really excited and interested to see how that could potentially come about within the city of Ithaca, and having some of our school board members join us.
That could be really good. Getting back to the city that we originally were concerned about, a big thing here is our interest in Green New Deal activities, dealing with climate change in everything that we do and trying to do it in an economically just way. Did you learn about that?
Yep, actually, the Green New Deal and like climate justice was one of the first workshops that I attended. The convening was 3 days long, and all 3 days were filled with a bunch of informational workshops. So Green New Deal was one of the first ones I attended, and a large portion of that was talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, and how cities can go after funding and utilize that. And then we talked about a couple of the grant cycles that they have coming out. I was able to connect with a woman named Annie Contractor, who is a part of an organization that helps small rural cities and towns go after these bigger pockets of funding for climate justice. So my plans are to connect Annie with the City of Ithaca's Director of Sustainability, so that all three of us can have further conversations about how to go after more of that funding, especially because within the city, we just passed Justice 50, where 50% of our capital budget goes into Green New Deal initiatives. And then most importantly, my favorite part of that is that 10% is dedicated to participatory budgeting. So just trying to get creative and figure out more funding opportunities so we can really increase that community participation and like workforce development as we go through the electrification of our city.
Interesting. Now, you said inflation reduction, that would be federal, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I stand corrected. Federal funding. I'm sorry. Thank
yeah,
you.
no, you didn't say anything wrong. You wrote something earlier that was puzzling. Well, let's go back to get a few numbers straight. In Ithaca City's budget, the Green New Deal is what part of the budget?
It's that 50% of, it's not a part of the budget. It's more so saying that 50% of our budget
You mean 50% of the Green New Deal budget?
will be allocated to climate justice
Yeah.
communities.
That's what that now fits with what
Yeah.
I'd said.
Yeah, but it's 10% of our capital budget goes to the we would like to include in one of the things that Rebecca is pushing for is that 10% of that budget goes to participatory budgeting so that we can have community members involved in these conversations and pay them for participating in the work being done.
Oh, I see. That's really interesting. I never realized that that was considered.
Mm-hmm. And that's more, yeah, like I said, that's to bring community into our conversations about what does electrifying our city look like, to also help with like workforce development initiatives and getting some job training programs, so on and so forth. Rebecca has some great plans and direction, like the direction that she would like to take with the Green New Deal is amazing. And that's why I was really within that workshop. My focus was connecting her or getting that contact information from Annie so that I can connect them more directly so that we can figure out those pools of funding to go after so that we can really fulfill our Green New Deal plans and initiatives.
Interesting. By the way, we were able on our own to electrify our own house.
How was that?
Well, it took a few years. It took quite a few years actually to go through the whole process. So I'm just saying, if you ever want to hear about it, hey.
I would love to. I would love to talk further about that.
But anyway, I mean, that's living with a professor. Another question about where does money come from is tax questions.
Yeah.
And apparently, I hear that you looked into that too.
Yes, there wasn't a dedicated workshop for taxes or property taxes or how to handle any of this. But through what, like I said, one of the things is that Local Progress offers is just networking for our elected officials. And through attending this conference, I actually met a Philadelphia council member who was talking a little bit about what they do with their property owners and how they handle their taxes over in Philadelphia. And there's a few policies, homestead and loop. These two policies pretty much help keep people in their homes because when their taxes become too unaffordable for them, they're able to do some really cool. I'm looking into it more, so excuse me for the spotty explanation, but essentially it helps one keep people's taxes at a low rate and like reduces like the inflation and all of that.
That would
Yeah,
be
so like,
for homeowners, right?
yeah, this would be for homeowners. This would be, yes, this
Yeah.
would be policy geared towards our homeowners. Once again, I would live in my ward is very mixed. So yes, we have a large amount of tenants within this ward, but we also have homeowners. So one of the things I'm also always thinking of, I advocate and I really push for tenant protections, but also, what are ways that we can help our homeowners as well? We can't forget about them. They are a part of our community. And within Philadelphia, they like some of their policies pretty much like put a cap on how much of their house value will be taxed. So they'll cap that. And then those homeowners will only pay a certain percentage of tax on that. And then I have to look more into the homestead policy. But I did get my hands on their policies and I did pass that along to our mayor and our city attorney just to see if this is feasible within New York State, because also recognizing that Philadelphia is in Pennsylvania, so their state laws and what they're allowed to do may be a lot more different to like how can we even turn this into something here in Ithaca? Because once again, when I did my canvassing, speaking to homeowners, being priced out is a huge concern. So just trying to keep those folks who are in their homes is where I'm at too.
Yeah, well, while we're on thinking a little bit about taxes, we excuse me, we may want to also think about Ithaca's special but not unique problem of being dominated by a huge university. Did you meet any people from similar situations?
Yeah, actually, so that was probably my highlight of the convening. And not to sound like a broken record, but like it's the biggest thing I took from local progress is really the networking. And so I was able to connect with Syracuse's auditor, who is absolutely amazing. And we spoke a little bit about what Syracuse is dealing with Upstate University as well as Syracuse University. Then I spoke to him about what I'm dealing with or what we're dealing with here in the city of Ithaca with Cornell University. And we kind of threw out there possibly looking for other elected officials that were at the convening that were also a part of college towns. So we were able to find the Berkeley auditor as well as a Berkeley council member. We were also able to find three staffers and then three elected officials from Providence, Rhode Island. And so we all started having this conversation about bringing forward some type of working group within local progress for our elected officials who are in these college towns to address how we're handling them, because we're all in different places. There's some cities that have MOUs like we do. There's some who don't. I know like Berkeley talked about how they had to sue their university in order to get some funds back. So like I said, what it sounded like is that we're all in different places. So just figuring out what is a blueprint that can work for all of us, and then allow that to also be passed forward to other college towns that elected officials might not be connected to local progress yet, or as they are entering, at least this blueprint is here, and we can help them out. And that's one of the really cool things is like local progress offers toolkits. So there's toolkits around reimagining public safety, and there's toolkits around affordable housing, and all of these resources where it's like, what would a petition look like for something like this, right? What would like just social media posts, when you're doing calls of action, what kind of calls of actions can you do? So it's just those resources just being passed on, or creating a toolkit for like something like dealing with dealing with a large university in your city, and some of the things that you can do. So yeah, so that is actually one of my potential bigger projects I will be doing with local progress. So I'm really, really excited to reconnect with the Syracuse auditor and see where we can go from that. We were able to get the contact information from all those folks that were at the convening. So it'll be, I'm not gonna say it'll be easy to pull us all together, because I don't know what everyone's schedule is looking like. And I think our schedules will be the biggest barrier, but we at least have all the contact information and at least can start those conversations on how do we work together to get to this bigger end goal for all of our cities.
Wow. That sounds like some progress.
Yes.
And getting back to, you mentioned housing, and that's certainly one of my biggest interests personally. And I've done a lot of a lot of these programs relating to housing also.
Yes. So my the workshop that I did attend around housing was regarding social housing. And that was pretty informative. The first half of it pretty much just explained how like the private market works when it comes to expenses and revenue and trying to create revenue, so on and so forth, so that like, those elected officials who are like kind of new to this and still understanding everything could kind of get the bigger picture. But then the second half of it, they welcomed some elected officials, one being from Chicago, who talked about aspects of social housing that they are doing in their cities. And social housing is a dream of mine. It is a dream of mine. I won't deny that. And I think that's something that was really cool, which kind of actually connects back to the Green New Deal, was that Chicago was able or is able to build social housing, and it's called green social housing through their funding that they're getting through the Green New Deal. And I believe they're going to be actually bonding some of that as well. So I didn't have much time to speak to the council member who spoke about it. However, I did get her contact information and am reaching out to sit down and have a further conversation, just once again to learn how did they do that, especially connecting that social housing, that Green New Deal aspect of it to that previous workshop that I attended where they explained where to go for the monies. I was just like, this seems like this could be the way, this could be the roadmap. So I really, really want to spend some time further researching that. Another thing that they talked about, there was two things that they talked about. They talked about Illinois, they do the tax increment. What is a tax increment? It's TIF, where it essentially they take their sales tax and I believe some of their property tax, and it goes back into pretty much back into the community and redeveloping the community as well. So I have to, once again, because it's a different state, I need to learn. That's something else that I really want to dig into and further research to see what they're doing and like how they're taking their taxes and funneling it back in. It seems like it might just be what we're doing with our community development fund in a way. But just want to get that further clarification on that. And then Minneapolis actually taxes their vacancies, their property owners who have vacancies at a slightly higher rate to kind of in a way deter them from actually keeping their spaces vacant.
That could be good for commercial properties in Ithaca. I
Yeah,
don't think there's much vacant housing
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Maybe there will be with all these new buildings.
Right. But yeah, so then but yeah, that's what I was thinking. And then maybe from like those from those commercial properties, then using that funding to go into our housing fund. Hopefully
That's
social
a
housing.
thought. Who knows? By
Yeah.
by
um
the way, there is a bill in the state legislature that would work toward create an authority that would start working toward social housing in New York State.
yes, I've
And
heard.
you good, good.
And I'm excited. I'm hoping I'm really hoping that this is something that we can get to. Um housing is my area of interest as well, and it really comes from the background and like the conditions that I grew up in, and I just feel like, once again, personal opinion, that housing should not be a profitable private market. And it is something that we all need in order to survive. And that's something that I believe we as government should figure out. How do we create, like, we should take this task on so that it can remain affordable, and then we don't have to worry about profit, because it's never profit over people. It should always be people over profit, in my opinion.
By the way, I just got an email today from the a New York City DSA group that is going to talk about how to campaign for this measure.
If you could forward me to that
Of
email, that
course, of course.
thank you,
I
thank you,
just made a note to myself to do that.
thank you.
Um, so definitely we're not alone when we dream about this. There are a lot of much more, I think, frankly, I think in New York City, more sophisticated people.
Mhm.
Hey, was there anybody from New York City at the conference?
Yes, actually, and one of the really cool things was I forgot what one of the New York City council, I forgot her name. I'm blanking on her name.
Uh,
I was on a phone bank. Her and I both helped host a New York City DSA phone bank for, was it Jamal Bowman?
Could be. I don't know.
I believe so. And so we both spoke, it was a via Zoom phone bank, and we both spoke on it. And then we were randomly in a few workshops together, and she looked at me and she was like, "Are you Kayla by any chance?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And she's like, "From Ithaca." And I was like, "Yes, I am." And she was like, "Oh, we were on the phone bank together." And I was like, "Oh, I thought that was you. Like your face looked really familiar." So she was there, Tiffany Caban was there. There was quite a few New York City council members there. Um, I would say that our overall chapter, or those who attended the convening from New York, we definitely got outbeat by other states. But it's okay. We had a good amount. I would say we probably had about no more than like 20 folks from New York.
New York State.
New York State, yes,
Yeah.
New York State. Specifically from New York City, I that number I don't know off the top of my head, but I know like we had a county legislator from Rochester there, her and I connected. Like I said, we had Syracuse auditor. We had a couple, well, of course, a couple folks from New York City. Um, we had Veronica Pilar there, our lovely county legislature. Yeah, I was trying to think of other areas.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that's what Veronica was doing.
Yes.
Wow. Um, well, I think we have a couple of things to talk about more briefly. You mentioned workers' rights.
Mhm. Yeah. So there was a couple workshops around workers' rights. Um, some of it was just, around like how do we message for like this need, and me, that's where really what I one of the things that I asked in the conference, because for folks who don't know, one of the legislations that I brought forward this year was just cause employment, which would ultimately eliminate at-will employment within the city of Ithaca. Um, and so I just asked around messaging around that, like, how do I carry that forward, especially for folks who feel like it's not a need here in the city of Ithaca. And like the biggest key takeaway from that was like just reminding the community that when we invest in our workers, we get higher quality work, right? And that's very true. Whatever we need to do to keep our workers happy, I'm a firm believer we should do that. Because if they're happy here, their product will show, right? And then there was some one of the more specific workshops I went to was around like extreme heat, which I thought was very interesting because, as I'm sure we all know, the Ithaca summers have gradually been getting hotter. And I'm just trying to proactively think about those contract workers, like our construction workers, or like our DPW workers who are out doing like the road work and all that. So like just how to handle extreme heat. And some of the things I believe it's like Phoenix is doing is just within their workers' rights and policies that they're passing, they're putting like heat exposure and heat standard measures in there, and just making sure staff has access to a cooling station, so they like an area that they can go and cool down in, making sure they have access to cold water. Some of the things that I thought actually just very naturally should have came in the workplace, but was very shocked to see that these also might be things that we have to take the extra step and measure to implement within our city. And that Phoenix legislation came from um, pretty much it wasn't a strike, but more so advocating around their airplane, the airplanes workers. I don't know their exact title, but those who come in after everyone gets off to clean the planes. Um, and on the West Coast, obviously the heat is very more extreme. And we learned that once folks get off the planes, the ACs go off, and once the ACs go off, then obviously the heat, it's unbearable. And there was one worker who got severely ill from the heat, and her supervisor actually made fun of her. And she had to she ended up being hospitalized. So that's how the extreme heat measures came into play in Phoenix. And so once again, hearing that story, I just started thinking proactively about what we might have to do here within the city of Ithaca, or what we not might, but what we can do here in the city of Ithaca for those workers who are facing these conditions in the summer. So yeah, so I'm really excited to also further explore that and see how that can also be included. Maybe not in the just cause legislation because it's different in a way, but as that next one of those next pieces of legislations to come after that, so that we can continue to increase and ensure that our workers are being treated the way that they deserve.
Yeah, indeed. And while I first thought, well, we don't have such heat problems here, but another issue is that probably our own workers, our own population is less ready for heat than
Yes.
in other places. Because I've noticed that at hot times, often somebody was like, well, I'm from Louisiana. This is nothing for me, and
Yeah.
I found myself saying, hey, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. Um, Finally, we have very little time left, but you
And
did.
something else that came from that was also that legislation is that I think they're also going to try to push that they can't you can't evict in extreme heat either. So that was really interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
further information on that, because we already have a code blue here, but it obviously doesn't include eviction, unfortunately. But figuring out, okay, now that we're also understanding that climate justice is a thing, and now the government is starting to take accountability for that. How do we put these policies in place where it's like we can't evict during extreme heat situations or when it's extremely cold outside? If we're already enacting a code blue, then why do we say it's okay to still continue to evict and potentially put people on these streets? So having those conversations, which I really appreciate too, because once again, it's like the power of networking and having over 450 elected officials in one space allows for these conversations to occur, and then for us to take it back to our cities and our respective communities and start maybe connecting some puzzle pieces that we weren't able to connect in the past.
thank you, Kayla Matos.
Of course.
This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.